We used to drive up to Fairfield Hills in Connecticut before they began renovating the hell out of the entire property. It was a psychiatric hospital with underground tunnels. They performed lobotomies and had a morgue on site. The guards were pretty used to teenagers sneaking in around there, and some of them wouldn't do anything except remind you to be safe and watch out for squatters. You had to enter through the basement windows, which were 6 feet up, but 2 feet below actual ground level. Wasn't hard, just sort of scary dropping into the unknown like that. We visited enough times and researched enough about the property to the point we began to feel vested in it. We visited often, even during the daytime. Eventually, my friend began dreaming about the place. One night, she dreamt she was a patient being transported underground. Another night, she was a patient in group therapy. And shortly after that, they all shifted to nightmares. We would return to the grounds after many of the dreams and nightmares she had, just to confirm specifics like building placement and relativity. It seemed like she was dreaming of past experiences, because she was spiritually connected, if you will, and this wouldn't be the first time she experienced something like this. One night, she had an extended nightmare of a lobotomy being performed on her, which was very vivid. And in the rest of the nightmare, she lived out the rest of her messed up vegetable life in the psych ward. I can't remember exactly what we found after researching, but it essentially confirmed a story of a famous case regarding a lobotomy, identical to what she had experienced in her dream. I didn't go with her the last time she went to the grounds after that particular nightmare. She told me she walked into the exact room the lobotomy was performed in, as well as other rooms from the nightmare, and then began to experience auditory and visual hallucinations that she could only describe as hell on earth, but with psychotic ghosts instead of demons. We never went back. I've explored a few abandoned asylums, which are scattered about New England. Belchertown State School in Massachusetts was by far the creepiest for me. The school was shut down in the early 90s and was known for being an all-around terrible place for patients. It's rumored that they often performed frontal lobotomies, but I don't know how accurate that is. I found myself 2 floors below ground level in a completely dark hallway minus the light from my headlamp. I walked into a padded cell that was incredibly quiet due to the padding. I've read about the quietest room in the world, and this felt a little bit like that. There was a decaying chair in the corner, and graffiti that said, there was an observation window with an old control panel as well. I crawled through a hole in the boarded-up entryway that led into the theater gymnasium. The first thing you see is what used to be an absolutely beautiful entryway. There were stairs on either side leading to a balcony, and bathrooms under each staircase. I went to open the door to one of the bathrooms to explore a little more. And as I opened it, a huge gust of wind slammed the door right in my face. It was one of the scariest experiences I've ever been through. The last I heard, the school was being torn down, but I'm glad I got in while it was still there. I was exploring the grounds of a big old New England mental institution's campus at night. It's a full moon, but it's pitch black inside because the windows are so dirty. Being dumb kids before smartphones, we didn't come prepared with a lot of light, and we're mostly navigating by 2 flashlights between our group and the moonlight when we were outside. We're in the main building, and most of it is just what you'd expect. 60s to 70s decor, peeling paint, a couple weird-looking chairs, and 2 legit rubber rooms. A movie had been shot there at some point, so some of the walls are burnt from a stunt or something. There's 2 stairwells in the building on either end, and we have to keep alternating between them because there's stuff in the way. We keep going through the floors until we reach the roof. The roof doors are these big, heavy metal solid doors. The far stairwell door won't budge at all, so we go back down and try the other stairwell. This one we can see is kind of wedged open, and the top corner of the door is bent back, letting light in. We squeeze out onto the roof and walk around for a bit. I happen to be holding the flashlight and turned it back to the door. The door wasn't just bent. It was peeled back to open it like a tuna can. There were 3 huge scars that I can only describe as claw marks, each one as long as an adult's forearm. I lost my shit and insisted it was time to go. We made an expeditious retreat out of the building, but it was still a good 2 to 3 minute walk back to our cars, which was definitely the most terrifying part of the night. No idea what could have made those marks. Just really glad we didn't decide to go into some of the other buildings that were totally sealed up. You had to enter those through some underground tunnels that connected the buildings, but the entrances were super sketchy. I grew up and still live in Connecticut, so there's freaky stuff happening in this state all the time. When I was in high school, my friends and I thought it was cool to break into abandoned insane asylums. One night, we snuck into a place called Fairfield Hills that has been called the Portal to Hell by TV shows and paranormal investigators. We get into one of the main buildings and begin walking up the stairs. A few flights up, we decide to stop to explore the floor. I look behind me, and there's a really long water hose wrapped up on the wall. I decided to carry one end with me as we walked, so we could use it as our trail marker, allowing us to easily follow it back to return to the same way we came. At one point, the hose stops pulling because it's met its end. So I place it on the ground, and we start to explore a little away from it. Eventually, we get to 2 huge steel doors with tiny windows on them. We shine our flashlights through those windows, and for the first time couldn't see an inch in front of us. We then hear a loud squeaking sound coming from the other side of that door, and we turned around and started power walking back the way we came. It seems like we're walking forever, because we can't find the water hose that I placed on the ground, but I swear we're going the right way. We start running because we're worried that we could be lost, eventually making it back to the stairwell that we started in. I look on the wall once again, and the water hose that I just used was wrapped back up onto the wall as if I never touched it. There were no other people in that building besides my group. We flew down those stairs, ran through the courtyard trying to avoid all the security driving back, hopped the fence, and drove off. I never went back, and my ghost hunting days were over. In Massachusetts, there used to be two of the most incredible abandoned asylums in the U.S., Danvers and Worcester State. They were sprawling expanses in the classic Kirkbride layout. But unfortunately, most of Worcester State was destroyed in a fire. Both have since been completely torn down, but I got to visit both places before it happened. Worcester State was a notorious haunted hotspot in New England. It had all kinds of stories circulating about it. But the main issue is that it was a place for drug deals and crime, so it was heavily patrolled for many years. When I started frequenting it in the early 2000s, much of the police presence had waned, so it was easier to explore, but the building was in bad shape due to the fire. So entering it would be foolish. I had been stopped by cops there, and all they really did was look you up and down and decide if you were a criminal or not. I'm a suburban white male with no criminal record, so they always just told us to leave or that it was dangerous. The only time I actually took off before we were found was when we were up there around midnight, and we found two vans, one white and one blue, with U.S. government, mind you, not state government plates, and it was backed up to a hole in the ground that had light coming out of it. I've seen this spot before, and in the daytime, it just looks like a pile of random detritus, like bricks and mortar and shit like that. I have always been led to believe it was abandoned, so why there were U.S. government vans there at night, with light coming out of a hole in the ground? I don't know. When I say light coming out of the ground, I don't mean like they had flashlights. This was bright fluorescent light, as though there were a room underground. No one followed us or anything, and shortly after, a huge fence was erected around it.